Welcome to AI ConvoCast, where we bring you the latest in AI and tech innovation. Quick housekeeping. Check out the affiliate links in our description. Using them supports the show, and please don't forget to rate, review, and share if you like what you hear. Let's jump right in.
Picture this. It's like 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in Washington, D.C. The tension's really high, and then boom, a political showdown kicks off that honestly might be one of the most critical moments for technology we've seen in a long time. We're talking about a recent, really stunning vote in the United States Senate, and it concerns nothing less than the future of artificial intelligence regulation in America.
That's exactly right. And for this deep dive, our mission is, well, to unpack the full story behind this really dramatic reversal. We want to explore the, profound implications for AI technology itself and dig into what this means for how America is going to govern really one of the most transformative technologies of our era.
And the timing you mentioned.
Yeah, the specific timing, early Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, around 4 a.m., and that just absolutely stunning 99-1 margin of the Senate vote. It tells a really powerful story about maybe shifting sands in Washington.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly was at the heart of this whole legislative drama?
Well, the core issue was a deeply controversial provision. It was kind of buried within what President Trump's administration had called his one big, beautiful bill. Now, if it had passed, this provision would have effectively stopped states, completely stopped them, from regulating artificial intelligence for a full decade.
A whole decade.
10 years. The language was pretty specific, too. It aimed to bar states from enforcing, and I'm quoting here, any law or regulation limiting, restricting, or otherwise regulating artificial intelligence models, artificial intelligence systems, or automated decision systems entered into interstate commerce. So imagine that. 10 years where states are essentially handcuffed on AI policy.
And the way they tried to do this wasn't just a straightforward ban, was it? It sounds like it was actually pretty clever if you're the one trying to push it through.
Oh, absolutely right. It was a particularly cunning mechanism. States would have been basically forced into this almost impossible choice. Either you access crucial federal funding for, vital services, or you keep your ability to protect your own citizens from potential AI harms.
So sort of dangling the money.
Exactly. Initially, this was tied to a massive $42 billion in federal broadband infrastructure funding. Huge amount. Even after some procedural objections were raised in the Senate, it was modified, but it still affected a significant $500 million AI infrastructure fund. So yeah, it was a clear attempt to use the immense power of federal spending to dictate state policy, kind of weaponizing the purse strings, really.
So this wasn't just, another political skirmish then. It feels like it represented something more, a genuinely rare moment of bipartisan unity against, powerful corporate influence. What was it about this issue, AI regulation, that managed to bridge those divides? Because so many other tech policy fights just don't.
That is a crucial question. And that overwhelming 99-1 vote wasn't just some political fluke. It really signals a potential seismic shift.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here, I think, is that the perceived societal harms of, let's say, unbridled AI, things like deepfakes, potential job displacement, and critically child safety, they seem to have hit a kind of critical mass. They've transcended the typical partisan lines, forging this new, almost bipartisan skepticism of corporate power, especially in the tech world. And importantly, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. State legislatures have actually been incredibly proactive on AI already.
That's a really important point. While D.C. was debating stopping regulation, the states were already moving ahead. Can you give us a sense of just how much activity there was at state level, and what kind of innovative things are they trying?
Absolutely. The legislative scene at the state level has been evolving incredibly quickly. States have been really proactive in tackling AI-related concerns. We've already seen 80 AI-related measures passed, and there's an astonishing 762 more currently pending across 45 states. They're just not waiting for the federal government.
Wow, 762 pending.
Yeah, it's huge. And to give you some specific examples, California has pretty comprehensive deepfake regulations already on the books. Tennessee passed its ELVIS Act that specifically protects musicians from AI voice mimicking. And Texas is also moving forward with its own Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act. It's just clear states see an urgent need to act, and they're trying out all sorts of different approaches.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. How did the key players line up on this political chessboard? Who was pushing for this moratorium?
Right. So on one side, you had Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. He chairs the influential Senate Commerce Committee. He was a major champion of this moratorium. arguing, essentially, that it was absolutely essential to prevent states from, quote, strangling AI deployment with EU-style regulation. His view was basically that too much state intervention would hurt innovation, maybe set the U.S. back compared to others.
Okay, so that's one side. But then you saw this, well, truly unlikely coalition form on the other side. You mentioned it was led by Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, a Republican known for being pretty critical of big tech, joined by Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington. What made that pairing so fascinating, and why were they so determined to stop this?
It really was a classic strange bedfellow situation.
Yeah.
Senator Blackburn, despite being a conservative, she has this strong independent streak and a history of pushing back against what she views as unchecked power, particularly from big tech. Then you have Senator Cantwell, a Democrat from a state like Washington, which is heavy on tech. So she understands the industry, but also clearly sees the need for strong consumer and public protections. They really united over the principle of states' rights and the absolute need to protect citizens from potential AI harms that a federal preemption might have just allowed to happen.
And the politics leading up to that Tuesday morning vote sound incredibly complex.
Oh, they were. The political maneuvering was intense and dramatic. So the provision originally passed the House of Representatives as a full 10-year blanket moratorium, just straight up. But it immediately hit significant resistance in the Senate. And this was mostly because of the Senate's really intricate procedural rules, the ones governing budget reconciliation bills.
Right, the budget rules.
Exactly. Those rules limit what can be included, basically.
Right.
Only things directly impacting the federal budget. A straight regulatory ban often doesn't qualify.
And Senator Cruz, being a strategist, he had this ingenious workaround, didn't he? Instead of directly banning state AI regulation, which might have failed procedurally, his revised version would basically withhold federal funding from states if they did regulate AI. How did that maneuver get around the rules and essentially, like you said, weaponize federal spending?
Precisely. It was a very clever pivot. By linking state regulation to federal funding eligibility, Cruz framed it as a fiscal issue, which is generally allowed under those reconciliation rules, rather than framing it as a direct regulatory prohibition. And that approach sidestepped the normal Senate filibuster rules, which would have needed 60 votes to overcome. It was clearly designed to put immense pressure on states, basically forcing them to choose, take the federal money, or keep your right to govern AI.
So let's set the scene. That weekend, right before the vote, intense negotiations are happening, and it really looked like a compromise between Senator Cruz and Senator Blackburn was actually coming together. What did that potential deal involve, and why did it seem like it might actually stick?
Yeah, it really did look like a deal was close. The details, as they emerged, suggested the moratorium would be cut from 10 years down to 5. And crucially, it would have included specific carve-outs exceptions, basically for state laws protecting children, creators, and other vulnerable groups. Senator Blackburn, in particular, was reportedly very focused on making sure Tennessee's ELVIS Act was safe.
Protecting the musicians' voices.
Exactly. Protecting artists from AI voice mimicking without their consent. So it seemed like they were nearing an agreement because it was a significant step back from the original, much broader ban. It looked like a workable compromise.
But then came the dramatic reversal. Just hours before the vote, Senator Blackburn pulls her support for that very compromise. That must have caught even seasoned observers off guard. What happened? What led to that sudden shift? And what was her powerful statement that basically blew up the deal?
It was absolutely a dramatic shift, yeah. And her statement was incredibly clear, left no doubt. She said, and I'm quoting directly again, "The current language is not acceptable to those who need these protections the most. This provision could allow big tech to continue to exploit kids, creators, and conservatives. Until Congress passes federally preemptive legislation like the Kids Online Safety Act and an online privacy framework, we can't block states from making laws that protect their citizens."
Wow, strong words.
Very strong. Her words basically highlighted this fundamental distrust. A feeling that the compromise, even with the changes, just didn't go far enough to really shield vulnerable groups, especially kids and creators, from the potential downsides of AI.
And the vote itself happened during what's called a vote-a-rama, right? That marathon overnight session where senators can just offer amendment after amendment on budget bills. Given all the back and forth, what was the final outcome? How decisive was it in the end?
The outcome was incredibly clear and surprisingly swift. The amendment to just strike the AI provision entirely, the one co-sponsored by Blackburn and Cantwell, it passed with remarkable ease. The final tally was stunning. 99 to 1.
99 to 1.
99 to 1. Only Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina voted to keep the moratorium language in. That overwhelming margin just really underscores the broad bipartisan consensus that formed against this specific attempt at federal preemption.
So let's zoom out for a second. The scope of AI technology we're talking about here, the thing at the heart of this debate, it's incredibly broad, isn't it? What kind of things does it actually cover? And what would the real-world impact have been if that moratorium had passed?
Yeah, it's crucial to understand the breadth here. We're talking about everything from, large language models like ChatGPT, the ones that generate text, code, images, all the way to sophisticated automated decision-making systems. These are systems used in really critical areas: hiring, lending decisions, even in the criminal justice system.
Right, high-stakes stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if that moratorium had passed, the practical impact would have been immense. It would have essentially forbidden states from regulating any of these applications.
Mm-hmm.
And that means potentially wiping out existing state laws that address things like deepfakes or discriminatory algorithms in hiring, or, critically, laws aimed at preventing AI-generated child abuse material. It would have created a massive regulatory gap.
With stakes that high, the reactions must have been pretty strong and varied across the board from different groups. It sounds like a real split.
Oh, absolutely. And what's fascinating here is just the sheer diversity of reactions you saw from different stakeholders, across the political map and the industry itself. It really shows how complex and contentious this whole area is. Consumer advocacy groups, for instance, were basically celebrating.
Yeah, I bet.
J.B. Branch of Public Citizen called it a major victory for the American people over the AI industry. And he emphasized that it showed lawmakers are aware of the proliferation of AI harms in real time. And James P. Steyer, who founded Common Sense Media, really hit the child safety angle, saying it was a victory for everyone, but especially every child, and every parent who wants nothing more than to ensure their kids are safe.
And AI safety experts also had something to say, right?
Sure.
And it sounds like this wasn't just a few people, but a pretty wide coalition that pushed back against the moratorium.
That's right. AI safety experts widely applauded the decision. Max Tegmark, who's the president of the Future of Life Institute, he stated that the overwhelming rejection of the amendment really underscored the massive bipartisan opposition to letting AI companies run amok, end quote. And this feeling was echoed by a very broad coalition. We're talking 40 state attorneys general plus 260 state legislators. All of them had actively opposed the moratorium. So yeah, this was a significant coordinated pushback.
Okay, but on the flip side, this outcome had to be a significant setback for the major tech companies, right? The ones who had reportedly lobbied hard for this provision. We're talking big names: Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, and even venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, which invests heavily in AI, had backed federal preemption. What was their main argument for why this moratorium was supposedly needed?
Yeah, it was definitely a setback for them. Their core argument was pretty straightforward, really. They claimed that having a patchwork of different state regulations would stifle innovation.
Mm-hmm.
They argued it would ultimately make the United States less competitive globally, especially against rivals like China.
Okay.
The idea was that having all these conflicting state requirements would create huge compliance headaches and costs, potentially handicapping American AI development just when it needs to accelerate. They really preferred a single, unified federal framework that everyone could follow.
So what does this all mean then? Looking forward, what does this mean for AI governance in the U.S.? This vote clearly rattled the cage. But beyond the immediate fallout, what are the sort of longer-term ripples? How does this decision fundamentally change the regulatory landscape for AI from here on out?
Well, the immediate implications from that Tuesday vote are pretty profound, both for the AI industry and certainly for state-level policymaking. States now explicitly, clearly retain their full authority to regulate AI technologies. So that means the existing patchwork of regulations, as the industry called it, won't just continue. It's likely going to evolve and probably expand.
So more state laws coming.
Very likely. We'll continue to see things like California's approach to deepfakes, Tennessee protecting artists' voices, those emerging frameworks in states like Texas and Colorado. They'll all move forward now without that federal threat hanging over them.
Yeah.
It really confirms states as these crucial incubators, these laboratories for AI policy.
And for the AI industry itself, you said it's a strategic defeat. What specifically does it mean for how they operate, how they plan for growth now that they have to deal with all these different state rules instead of one federal one?
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift for them, for their operating environment. They're just going to have to adapt to navigating multiple, potentially conflicting regulatory frameworks across different states. That unified federal approach they hoped for, it's off the table for now.
Which means more complexity.
Exactly. It almost certainly increases their compliance costs. It adds layers of complexity to operating nationally. And it could even force them to sort of tailor products or services differently for different state markets, which is definitely a headache for companies that thrive on economies of scale.
And the broader political side of this is pretty significant, too. That 99-to-1 vote really shows that opposition to big tech influence can still unite lawmakers across party lines, right? Even when everything else seems so polarized. What does that signal for future tech policy debates in D.C.?
It's a really powerful signal, I think. This bipartisan skepticism of, let's call it, concentrated corporate power. It might very well influence future tech policy debates that go way beyond just AI. It suggests that when issues get framed around clear public safety concerns, especially things impacting children, or fundamental rights like intellectual property, lawmakers are actually willing to set aside some of their partisan differences. This coalition that came together, critics of big tech, states' rights advocates, it could become a kind of template for future actions on technology issues.
What's also interesting is thinking about whether the failure of this federal preemption might actually speed up state-level AI regulation. Without that immediate threat of losing federal dollars, could states feel even more emboldened now to push ahead with their own rules?
That's a great observation. I think it's very possible. The federal threat, at least in that form, is gone. This vote effectively validates and really empowers state initiatives. Without worrying about federal funding being yanked, states have a much clearer green light to experiment, to innovate with their own regulatory frameworks.
So maybe even more diverse approaches.
Could be. You might see states sort of competing to become leaders in AI governance, trying to attract what they see as responsible AI development while discouraging harmful uses. And, this outcome also raises some interesting questions about the broader Trump administration's approach to tech regulation. While the administration often leans towards deregulation, the Senate's decisive rejection here suggests there are definite limits to how far lawmakers will go to accommodate industry desires when public safety is clearly perceived to be at stake. We can probably also predict a shift in how AI companies lobby now. Instead of pushing for that big blanket federal preemption, they'll likely have to focus more effort on shaping individual state regulations state by state. And maybe we'll see renewed efforts for some kind of federal AI legislation down the road, but this time it would likely have to be something that finds a way to address industry concerns while explicitly preserving state authority in key areas. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really reinforces that classic idea of states as laboratories of democracy. They're not just waiting for Washington on this one. They're actively shaping policy that could end up being models for other states, or maybe even for future federal action.
So there you have it, the Senate's decisive 99-to-1 vote, stripping that AI regulation moratorium from President Trump's one big, beautiful bill. It really does feel like a watershed moment in American technology policy. It's a powerful demonstration that even today, with intense corporate influence and deep political divides, bipartisan coalitions can still form around protecting public safety and, crucially, state sovereignty.
And that really is the key takeaway, I think. As AI capabilities keep advancing, and they're advancing incredibly fast, and as new risks inevitably pop up, that fundamental tension, the one between encouraging innovation and ensuring responsible regulation, that's going to continue to evolve. But what this vote did, definitively, is ensure that states will remain active, vital players in shaping America's AI future. They won't just be silent bystanders. This story is definitely far from over, and it's going to keep influencing that broader, ever-changing relationship between technology, government, and, all of us in society for years to come.
Thank you for listening to AI Convo Cast. Please don't forget to rate, review, and share if you like what you hear. Thanks, and hope to see you again next time.